leaned over on the window, rolled down the window, popped.
Keefe D is back running his mouth about the night Tupac was shot. And this time he just dropped Tupac's final words. And let's be real, it's nothing like anyone expected. But that's not even the wildest part. Keith's also revealing brand new details about what went down that night. And if he's telling the truth, it could change everything we thought we knew about Tupac's murder. Let's get into it. Kev breaks the ultimate code for years after Pac got hit. The street stayed silent about what really went down that night in Vegas. That's just how the game works. You don't snitch, you don't cooperate with the laws, and you definitely don't put your business out there for the whole world to see. The code of silence in the hood is stronger than any oath, and breaking it usually means signing your own death warrant. But sometimes when your back is against the wall and the feds got you by the throat, even the realest soldiers start singing a different tune. By 2008, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis found himself in a position that no og ever wants to be in, facing life in a pin on federal drug charges with no way out except cooperation. The same streets that had made him rich and powerful were about to swallow him whole, and the only lifeline the government was throwing him involved breaking the most sacred rule of hood politics. But when you're looking at spending the rest of your life in a cage, even the hardest gangsters start reconsidering their options. Keefe D first detailed his involvement in the 2008 Prefer Agreement with the LAPD, where he was promised immunity for information related to Tupac and the notorious big murders. This wasn't just any regular cooperation deal. This was a chance to spill everything about the biggest unsolved murders in hip-hop history, with the promise that none of it could be used against him in court. The proffer was like a golden ticket out of prison, a legal shield that would protect Keefe D while he violated every principle he lived by for decades. Under this agreement, he could tell the whole truth about September 7, 1996, without fear of prosecution. It was the kind of deal that only comes around once in a lifetime, and Keefe D grabbed it with both hands. What came out of those interrogation rooms was pure street gospel, a detailed breakdown of how one of hip-hop's greatest legends got murked, told by someone who was right there in the thick of it. For the first time, investigators had someone willing to connect all the dots to explain not just the who and what, but the how and why behind one of the most shocking crimes in entertainment history. According to Keefe D's account, the whole operation was planned and executed like a military strike by Southside Crips looking to settle the score for that MGM Grand beatdown. Keefe D claimed he was in the front passenger seat of the white Cadillac driven by Terrence Brown, with Orlando Anderson and Deandra Smith in the back seat. This wasn't some random drive-by. This was a calculated hit carried out by seasoned street soldiers who knew exactly what they were doing. The moment of truth came at that red light on East Flamingo Road in Koval Lane around 11:15 p.m. when two worlds collided in the worst possible way. The white Cadillac pulled up next to Pac's black BMW, and for a few seconds time seemed to freeze. What happened next would be replayed in Keefe D's mind for the rest of his life, and would eventually become the evidence that put him behind bars.
Keefe D claims that the girls who were riding alongside Tupac and Suge Knight are what drew their attention to the BMW. They're screaming out his name, Tupac, Tupac.
Like, there's Suge. Like, and then he was like, come on, come go with me. Come go with us. We're going to 662.
The bros, Tupac, Tupac. And we like, there you go.
That's some real ironic street justice, right? They're Pac's own fame. The very thing that made him a target was also what gave away his location to the shooters. Those excited fans hollering his name might as well have been painting a bullseye on that BMW. Hood, sometimes your biggest blessing becomes your biggest curse when the car is pulled up side by side. Keefe D, who is seated in the right front passenger seat of the white Cadillac and who has the gun, realizes that he's not going to be in a position to shoot, because he's going to have to shoot across the car and across the face of his driver. So what did the OG do? He said he passed the Glock to the backseat passengers. But passing that piece was like passing a death sentence, and not everyone in that car was ready to be the one to pull the trigger on one of hip-hop's biggest stars.
Keefe D turns around to hand the gun to the back seat, attempting to give it to DeAndre Smith, who would be in the best position to shoot. DeAndre resists, puts his hand up and says, nah, no thanks, not me.
I gave it to Dre, and Dre was like, no.
The gunshots erupted like thunder in the Vegas night, shattering the peace and changing everything forever. When they pulled up next to Tupac's BMW at a red light on East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane around 11:15 p.m., shots were fired from the Cadillac. The muzzle flashes lit up both cars like deadly lightning, And in those few seconds, hip-hop lost one of its realest voices. The bullets found their mark with deadly precision. Tupac was hit 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, once in the thigh, and died 6 days. Later on September 13, 1996, Suge Knight was grazed by a bullet. Those chest shots were the ones that did the real damage, turning what started as street beef into a tragedy that would haunt hip-hop forever. Years later, when Keefe D was describing what he witnessed, he showed just how cold the streets had made him. Keefe D described Tupac as bobbing and weaving or breakdancing in the car during the shooting, a comment made in a 2023 interview that some interpreted as disrespectful. That kind of callousness would later be used against him in court, showing prosecutors and juries just what kind of person they were dealing with. Keefe D claimed the group later went to the Carriage House Hotel. That's where they tried to get rid of evidence and figure out what their next move would be after murking one of the biggest names in music for years. After spilling his guts to the cops, Keefe D thought he was untouchable. The immunity deal had saved his from the drug charges, and the case stayed cold as ice. But this Og made a fatal mistake. He got addicted to the spotlight and the respect that came with being the only living person who really knew what happened that night. He later spoke publicly in a 2018 Netflix documentary, Bet's Death Row Chronicles, and his memoir, which reignited police interest. But the wildest part of Keefe D's story was still to come. In his memoir and interviews, Keefe D suggested the murder was tied to a $1 million bounty allegedly offered by Sean Diddy Combs to kill Tupac, and Suge, a claim he made in a 2008 police confession and repeated in media. If this was true, it would mean the hit on Pac was ordered by one of hip-hop's biggest mogul. But like a lot of street tales, this one started falling apart under scrutiny. His lawyer later stated this was a lie to gain attention, and no evidence has corroborated this allegation against Combs. It turned out Keefe D might have been mixing truth with fiction, trying to make his story more sensational and profitable. This leaves us wondering what really happened that night. The night of Picture This Vegas was jumping that night, with fight fans rolling in from every hood in America to peep Mike Tyson throw hands with Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand. Among all the ballers and shot callers in the building was Pac himself, the realest rapper to ever grab a mic, riding with his Death Row family, led by the big homie Shoe Knight. What started as a night to celebrate and get that paper turned into something way more serious, something that would have the whole hip-hop nation mourning for decades to come. The energy at the MGM was different that night. You feel me? Pac rolled up with his crew looking like money, all black, everything ready to watch Iron Mike do what he does best. But underneath all that flashiness, there was tension brewing, the kind of beef that had been simmering on the streets for years between different sets and different coasts. Vegas might have seemed like neutral territory, but when you're dealing with real street politics, there ain't no safe zone. The shooting was allegedly a retaliatory act following a brawl at the MGM Grand Hotel after a Mike Tyson boxing match. See, what a lot of people don't understand is that this wasn't some random act of violence. This was the streets settling a score that had been building up for way too long. The fight itself was over before most folks could blink. Tyson dropped Seldon in the first round like he was sparring with a lightweight, but for Pac and his people, the real drama was just getting started. As they were making their way through that crowded hotel lobby, fate decided to throw a curveball that would change everything. That's when they spotted Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, a young soldier from the Southside Compton Crips. Now, Baby Lane wasn't just some random dude. He was connected part of a crew that had serious beef with Death Row's mob. PYU affiliates. His presence at the MGM wasn't no coincidence, and when Pac's crew peeped him, things got real quick. What happened next was caught on every security camera in that lobby. Tupac, along with Marion, Suge Knight, and members of their Mob Peru affiliated entourage, attacked Keefe D's nephew Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, a Southside cry, in the hotel lobby. This wasn't no fair one-on-one. This was a straight-up jumping with multiple dudes putting hands and feet on Baby Lane.
And on this incident, you will see Tupac Shakur, who's wearing a shiny satiny shirt, along with Marion Suge Knight, who's a large man in a brown suit, punching and kicking Orlando Anderson. Following this incident, you'll see hotel security intervene, and then they will leave the area of the fight.
If you know anything about how the streets operate, you know that kind of disrespect can't slide. When someone gets violated like that, especially in front of all those cameras and witnesses, retaliation isn't just expected, it's mandatory. That's just the code of the streets, and everybody who's really from The hood knows that code is written in blood for Dwayne Keefe Davis baby Lane's uncle, and an Og with serious stripes in the Southside Compton Crips. Watching his nephew get jumped like that was like watching someone disrespect his whole family tree. Keefe D described the attack as a humiliation for the Crips, prompting him to organize a response in the world where Keefe D came up. Letting something like that slide would mean losing all respect and credibility on the streets. See Keefe D wasn't just some wannabe gangster. This dude was certified street royalty, the type of Og that young soldiers looked up to and rival sets respected out of fear. He claimed the ongoing feud between the mob PYU aligned with Death Row Records and the Southside Crips exacerbated by this incident fueled the decision to target Tupac and Suge Knight. This beef went way deeper than just some hotel lobby scuffle. This was years of territorial disputes, drug turf wars, and gang politics, all coming to a head. Keefe D said he and his crew, including Orlando Anderson, Terrence T. Brown, and Deandra Dre Smith, planned to confront Tupac and Suge at Club 662. Where a Death Row Records afterparty was expected. Club 662 was Suga's spot, a place where Death Row artists and affiliates would post up after big events. The plan was simple but deadly: catch them slipping and handle business the street way. But see, when you're dealing with this level of street politics, you need the right tools for the job. He claimed he obtained a .040 caliber Glock from a New York drug dealer named Zip to use in the attack. That piece would become the weapon that changed hip-hop history, passed from hand to hand until it ended up with someone ready to squeeze that trigger.
Zip, who knows about Puffy's offer to Keefe, says this is a good time to take care of that thing.
Dude, right there, it's perfect opportunity, baby. That was Zip talking.
The crew made their move toward Club 662, adrenaline pumping and hearts full of that street justice mentality. They positioned themselves like hunters waiting for prey, knowing that their targets would eventually show up to celebrate. After waiting near Club 662 and stopping at a liquor barn store, the group reportedly abandoned the initial plan when Tupac and Suge didn't show up. But the streets have a funny way of putting you exactly where you need to be. When fate decides to intervene, they didn't show up. We waited about 15-20 minutes. They didn't show up, so they let's go get some liquor. As the years passed and Keefe D kept running his mouth in interviews and documentaries, law enforcement started paying attention again. The man who thought he was protected by an immunity deal was about to learn that in the legal game, just like in the streets, there ain't no such thing as lifetime protection. The walls were closing in on the last living witness to one of hip-hop's greatest tragedies, and his own words were about to become the evidence that brought him down. When your own words convict you. By 2023, Keefe D had been living like a hood celebrity for over a decade, dining out on his story about being the last man standing who really knew what went down the night Pac got hit. He'd written books, done interviews, appeared in documentaries, basically turned his involvement in one of hip-hop's most infamous murders into a brand. But what this Og didn't realize was that every time he opened his mouth, he was building the case that would eventually put him in chains. The chickens came home to roost on September 29, 2023, when the long arm of the law finally caught up with the self-proclaimed last living witness. On September 29, 2023, Keefe D was arrested and indicted for murder with a deadly weapon plus a gang enhancement for orchestrating Tupac's killing. After 27 years of walking free, the street's most notorious storyteller was about to face the consequences of his own loose lips. This wasn't just some regular arrest. This was the first time anyone had been charged in connection with the murder that shook the hip-hop world to its core. Prosecutors allege he was the shot caller who provided the gun and ordered the attack in Nevada. Being the mastermind behind a murder carries the same weight as pulling the trigger yourself, which meant he was looking at life behind bars for orchestrating the hit on one of music's biggest legends.
Okay, so, but he was the one that was supposed to shoot up Tupac and Suge, but for some reason, he wasn't ready for it, so he gave the gun to Orlando, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. But when faced with the reality of spending his golden years in a concrete cell, Keefe D started singing a whole different song. The same dude who had been proudly claiming his role in Pac's murder for years suddenly developed amnesia about the whole thing. In a 2025 jailhouse interview with ABC News, Keefe D retracted his earlier confessions, claiming he was not in Las Vegas, but in Los Angeles, 300 meters away on the night of the shooting. The transformation was as dramatic as it was desperate. Gone was the boastful street legend who had made a career out of being the realest gangster alive. In his place sat a scared old man trying to talk his way out of the biggest jam of his life. He said he fabricated his involvement for fame and money, asserting that his memoir was written by a co-author who took artistic liberties and that he never.
Now Keefe D claims he didn't write that memoir or even read it. Kind of shocking given the back of the book says the last living eyewitness to Tupac's murder is telling his story. Keefe D claims his co-author took artistic liberties with the writing, telling ABC News, "I just gave him details of my life."
When his back was really against the wall, Keefe D did what a lot of desperate defendants do. He started pointing fingers at other people. Keefe D accused Reggie Wright Jr., a former death row security guard, of orchestrating the murder, though he provided no evidence. This was particularly foul, because Wright had dedicated his career to protecting the very artist that Keefe D was accused of targeting. Wright wasn't having none of that nonsense, and his response showed just how weak KE's new defense strategy really was. Wright denied involvement, calling the accusation a deflection. His statement exposed the obvious desperation behind Keefe D's finger-pointing. Legal experts who know the game weren't buying KD's sudden change of heart. Either they could see right through the desperation and recognized it for what it was, a Hail Mary by someone who finally realized that the streets had led him to a dead end. Keefe D's lawyer Carl Arnold argues that his confessions were for entertainment purposes, that the prosecution lacks physical evidence, for example the gun or car, and that delays in charging him violated his rights. The legal process hit several delays, which meant more time behind bars for the former street legend. His trial, initially set for 2024, was delayed to February 2026. Due to new evidence and witness testimony. Every delay meant more time for Keefe D to think about how his hunger for fame and respect had led him straight to a jail cell.
Claim they have witnesses who can testify Keefe D wasn't in Vegas the night of the shooting, despite claiming for years he was. Keefe D claims he was in LA when the shooting happened, and he has about 20 to 30 people who will testify to confirm that. But he didn't name any names.
Next year, the irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The same desire for street credibility and recognition that had driven Keefe D to brag about his involvement in Pac's murder was now the very thing that had him facing life in prison. Every interview, every book chapter, every documentary appearance had been another step toward his own downfall. Criminal defense attorney Tyler Bailey broke down the reality of KE's situation with the kind of cold analysis that cuts through all the street mythology and gets to the heart of the matter. The transformation from hood celebrity to desperate defendant served as a cold reminder of what happens when the streets finally catch up with you. Keefe D had spent years building his reputation as the realest gangster alive, the Og who had the balls to tell the truth about hip-hop's biggest mystery, but now all that street credibility was working against him in the worst possible way. As the case continues to move through the legal system, Keefe D's accounts are inconsistent with earlier confessions, placing him at the scene, and later statements denying involvement. His retractions may be a legal strategy as prosecutors rely heavily on his own admission, but the damage was done years ago when a man who prided himself on being a street legend decided that fame was more important than staying free. The whole situation serves as a cautionary tale about the power of words in the digital age and the permanence of public statements in an era where everything is recorded, archived, and searchable. Criminals can no longer rely on the old street wisdom of what happens in the hood stays in the hood. Keefe D's story shows that when you put your business out there for the world to see, eventually that business will come back to haunt you in ways you never imagined. His journey from untouchable street figure to county jail defendant also highlights how the justice system has evolved to use new forms of evidence and investigation techniques where old school police work might have hit dead ends. Because of the code of silence, modern prosecutors can build cases using social media posts, podcast interviews, and self-published memoirs, the very technology that allowed Keefe D to build his brand as a street storyteller became the rope he used to hang himself. The case also represents something bigger than just one man's downfall. It's a reckoning for a generation of street figures who thought they could profit from their criminal past without facing consequences. In the social media age where everyone wants to be famous and every story can become content, Keefe D's fate serves as a warning to anyone thinking they can turn their criminal history into a brand. Sometimes keeping it real means keeping your mouth shut, and this Og learned that lesson way too late. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.